Okay, so we're on question 20 of the sample final, and strangely, question 20 and question 21 are identical except using different numbers. So this video is for both question 20 and question 21. The mean annual income for people in a certain city in thousands of dollars is 46 with a standard deviation of 34. A pollster draws a sample of 90 people to interview. Now, one thing I want to point out here is when it says in thousands of dollars, and especially if that's written out in words, you're not going to convert this 46 to 46,000. You're just going to use the actual numbers that they give you, 46, 34, 90, etc. So first question, what's the probability that the sample mean income is less than 41? So just like in question 19, if it's saying what is the probability, we're going to use second var's normal CDF. And it says less than 41. So that means the highest it can be is 41, and that makes 41 our upper bound. Anytime it says less than, then the number they give you is going to be the upper bound. The lower bound, we just always use minus 1e99 for the lower bound when the keyword is less than. And then the mean is the mean that's given in the top part of the problem, which is 46. And the standard deviation, again, it's going to be the number that's given to you divided by the square root of the sample size, and sample size is 90. And if you're not entirely sure whether you should be doing the divide by square root of sample size or not, the thing you're looking for here is that if it says the sample mean is less than whatever number, more than whatever. If we're talking about the sample mean, then that's when you have to use the divided by the square root of n. Part 5 of this one, or part E, it now says an individual, and that's why you sometimes go back to not dividing by the square root of n. But if it's talking about the sample mean, sample mean, sample mean, sample mean, as it is in the first 4 parts, you always do divided by the square root of the sample size. Paste and enter. And the good thing with chapter 7 compared to chapter 6 is that you always are able to get your answer directly. You don't have to think about whether it's more than, less than, and if you have to subtract from 1 at the end. It's just the function will always give you your final answer. Probability that the sample mean income is between. Between is kind of the easiest case because it's probability. We're still going to use normal CDF. And if it's between, then we just put those two numbers in for the lower and the upper, and we don't have to use the E99, 1E99, any of that. Mean stays the same. Standard deviations is still going to be divided by square root of 90 because we're still talking about a sample mean here. Paste. And there's the answer. Now we're going from probability to percentile, and just like in number 19 with percentile, we're going to go second var's inverse norm, and the area is going to be the percentile that they give us, but as a decimal, so we're going to divide by 100. Mean is still going to be 46. Standard deviation, because it's 20th percentile of the sample mean, we're still going to do 34 divided by square root of 90. Again, you're probably not going to have this line here on your calculator, but if you do, just keep it at left, paste, enter, And because it's not a probability, it doesn't need to be a 0 point something number. Part D, would it be unusual? If it's would it be unusual, it is asking you for a probability. That word probability doesn't show up there, but you follow the same rules for probability. So back to second bars, normal CDF, and now it's saying less than 34. So we'll still use the minus 1E99 for the lower, 34 for the upper, 46 for the mean. And because it says sample mean, we're going to do the 34 divided by the square root of 90. And oh, this brings up a good thing. So anytime you see this over here, the first thing that should make you realize that this is something unusual happening here, not unusual as in the answer to this question, but in terms of the kind of number that you're seeing. It's a probability one that's supposed to give you 0 point something, but it gave you 4 point something. And but this E minus 4 over here means that you have to move the decimal place 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left, which means that your actual answer is going to be 0.0004. The 4 stays a 4 because the next number is a 0. So as the way you would type it in would be like this, 0.0004. As long as you have a minus 4 over here, it's always going to be 3 zeros followed by the first number there, and you may or may not have to round that first number up depending on what number is directly after it. If you get a number other than minus 4 here, like minus 5 or minus 6, you may have made an error in your calculations. So I would recommend, if it's anything other than a minus 4 that shows up there, to go in and double check that you've done the calculation correctly. But anyway, now in terms of the answering the question, would it be unusual? With all of these, it always wants you to type in the probability, so you'd put the 0.0004 here, and then you have to compare this number to 0.05. It's quite a bit lower, so that means it would be unusual. Oops, this is for this part. It would be unusual, and that goes here, because this is part 4, not part 5. Part 5, usually in 7.3, if it's a 5-part question, part 5 changes one thing. It changes from sample mean to an individual. And sometimes it'll give you a different number here. In this case, it's the same number. But because it's still a would it be unusual, which is a type of probability question, then second VARS, normal CDF, and we still have the same lower and upper bound and the same mean. The only thing that's going to change here is now, instead of it being a sample mean, it's an individual. And so we get rid of all of this part, where you divide by anything, and you just use the standard deviation as given, because it's we're no longer finding the probability about a sample mean, we're finding the probability about an individual. And that's literally the only thing that changes. And again, we got a number with the E minus 4 here. So that's going to be what we put for our probability here. And so in this case, it's going to be 0.000, 3 zeros because it's minus 4, and then 1 because the number that follows 1 is 4, so it's not going to round up to a 2, it's going to stay a 1. And of course, 0.0001 is also much less than 0.05, so it would be unusual. So these exact same 5 parts show up again in question 21, so there's not going to be a separate video for 21. You should be able to follow this one and get all the answers for 21 that way.